All right, so today we're going on a deep dive.
A deep dive.
Yeah, into the world of National Socialism.
Okay.
But, hold on. We're not just going to skim the surface. We're going deep,
Right.
exploring this ideology
Yeah.
in ways you might not expect.
Interesting.
Our main source today is this academic article.
Okay.
And the author's approach is really what makes this so interesting.
I agree. He studied both socialist and fascist works.
Oh, wow.
Not, to endorse them, but to understand them.
Yeah.
Which is an important distinction.
That's a really good point. So let's just jump right into it.
Right.
The article jumps right into a big contradiction, the name, National Socialism. So it argues that the movement wasn't truly socialist at all.
Right.
So what do you make of that?
Well, the article claims that the name was, in a way, a bit of a misnomer. And it even suggests that Hitler himself later regretted.
Oh, wow.
The socialist label.
Yeah.
To understand why, we need to look at the actual economic policies, of the Nazi regime. So they implemented things like price controls.
Oh.
Which might sound, kind of socialist-y.
Yeah.
But the goal was always to strengthen the nation, not to redistribute wealth or promote social equality.
So if it wasn't pure socialism, what was it?
Right.
The article calls it a hybrid ideology.
It does, yeah.
So what does that actually mean?
I think it means they pulled ideas from both the left and the right, but always with this focus on what would benefit the nation.
Interesting.
So, for example, if market capitalism served the nation, they embraced it.
Okay.
But if they felt like price controls were needed to boost national power, they used those instead.
So it wasn't really about a rigid ideology, but it was more about just being pragmatic.
I think so, yeah.
In service of this nationalistic ideal.
Yeah.
And of course, at the heart of it all.
At the heart of it all.
Was Hitler.
Right.
The article dives into his role, suggesting that he wasn't just another dictator.
Another dictator. Nope.
So how did he see himself?
It claims that he believed that he was the embodiment of the German soul.
Wow.
Channeling the will of the people in a way that transcended, democratic systems.
That's a very intense concept.
It is.
So does that make his rule more or less representative than a democracy?
It's a tough question to consider.
That's a chilling thought.
It is, for sure.
The article touches on the complexity of it.
It does,
And hints that while his belief was obviously very dangerous.
Yeah, of course.
He genuinely thought that he was acting in the best interest of the German people.
Yeah, I think so.
So whether or not you agree with that, it's important to understand that perspective when analyzing the ideology itself.
Exactly.
So we've got this hybrid ideology, this leader who sees himself as almost this mystical figure. And then the article throws another curveball.
Oh, yeah.
The Nazis, this product of modernism, was obsessed with this kind of traditionalism.
Right.
How does that even work?
Right, yeah.
It's a fascinating contradiction.
It is.
They were trying to create this super modern, technologically advanced state, but also harking back to this idealized, almost mythical past.
Right.
A prime example of this is Himmler and the SS.
Yeah.
So the article points out how they modeled themselves after the Teutonic Order, which, for our listeners, was this medieval German order known for its military prowess and its religious devotion.
Right.
So they favored aristocratic lineage and sought to revive a sense of ancient chivalry.
Okay.
Wait, the Teutonic Order?
Yeah.
Wasn't that a Christian order?
It was, yeah.
How does that fit in with what we know about the Nazis?
That's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
The article argues that the traditionalism that they promoted was actually quite foreign to most Germans. They drew upon a murky, almost occult interpretation of ancient paganism, something most people had no real connection to.
So they were essentially manufacturing this tradition that never really existed.
Yeah, pretty much.
Almost like rewriting history to fit their ideology.
Exactly.
Which leads us to another big question.
Okay.
The relationship between National Socialism and Christianity.
Right. Big one.
This is a complex issue.
It is, yeah.
The article makes a bold claim that Hitler fundamentally misunderstood German history by trying to supplant Christianity.
Okay.
Hold on. I thought the Nazis were violently opposed to Christianity.
Right. So it's more complicated than that. It argues that he believed that Christianity was forced on the German people.
Oh.
But the author suggests the opposite.
Okay.
That it was a natural evolution of earlier beliefs.
Okay.
He even points out that the first two Reichs were deeply Christian.
Really?
Something that Hitler seemed to ignore.
So it's challenging this idea that Christianity was somehow foreign to German culture.
Right.
That's a really different perspective than what we usually hear.
Definitely.
But where does this all leave us?
Good question.
What conclusions does the article offer about the legacy of National Socialism?
No, it poses a provocative question.
Okay.
Are there any salvageable aspects?
Wait, really?
Yeah.
There are aspects worth saving.
Potentially.
I'm surprised.
Okay, well, so the article argues that the idea of a state serving its people isn't inherently bad, right?
Right.
You find that in the political system. The problem is how Hitler defined the people, right?
Right.
His definition was based on racial purity and exclusion.
So the problem wasn't the idea itself.
Right.
It was more just who
it included.
Got to be considered a part of that people.
Right.
That makes sense, but it's still very a slippery slope.
For sure.
And to build on that, the article makes another really crucial point.
Yeah.
Any National Socialist movement, if it were to be considered ethical, would need a strong moral grounding provided by an authority higher than the state itself.
Higher than the state itself, exactly.
So it's almost like it's acknowledging the potential for abuse within that kind of system.
Right.
And saying that there needs to be an external check on power.
Check on power, right.
Yeah. That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it is. And it leads to some even bigger questions, right?
Yeah.
Who gets to define the people? And what safeguards are necessary to prevent those in power from exploiting that definition?
We're gonna dig into those questions even more in the next part of our deep dive.
That's right.
Okay, so we've gone from debunking this, socialist label, to uncovering Hitler's self-perception, to grappling with this weird mix of modernism and this manufactured tradition.
Right, manufactured tradition, yep.
And now we're left with this big question of power, morality, and the very definition of the people.
Yeah.
This is heavy stuff.
It is. It is heavy stuff.
And it's only going to get more complex as we move on to the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore the world of neo-Nazism.
Oh, boy. Okay, well, stay with us.
Stay with us. So, welcome back.
Okay.
I hope you are ready to dive deeper.
Well, I'm ready.
Because things are about to get even more complex as we wade into the world of neo-Nazism. Yeah, after that last segment, my head is spinning a bit.
Yeah.
It's disturbing to think about how these hateful ideologies from the past
Right.
are still echoing in the present.
Yeah. It's unsettling.
Yeah.
It is. But it's a good reminder that the ideas of the past don't just vanish.
Yeah.
They linger sometimes.
Yeah.
Waiting for the right moment to resurface.
So let's talk about neo-Nazism.
Oh.
What are we actually dealing with here?
Yeah.
Is this just a carbon copy of Nazi ideology?
It's a good question.
Or is there something more to it?
It's actually much more complicated than just a simple revival of old ideas.
Okay.
Neo-Nazism is not a single unified movement.
Right.
It's more like a collection of different groups and individuals.
What?
All drawing inspiration from National Socialism, but often interpreting it in very different ways.
So there's no, single neo-Nazi playbook?
Not exactly. I mean, there are certainly common threads that run through most neo-Nazi groups, like white supremacy, anti-Semitism, a glorification of Nazi Germany and its leaders.
Okay.
But how those ideas manifest can vary drastically from group to group.
So it's more like a spectrum.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
With some groups clinging very tightly to the original Nazi ideology, while others kind of take those core ideas and twist them.
Yeah, and twist them.
In new and potentially even more extreme directions.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes studying neo-Nazism so challenging.
Yeah.
You can't just make these sweeping generalizations.
Right.
You have to be willing to dive into the nuances of each group and individual to really understand their specific motivations and goals.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about such a fragmented movement
Uh-huh.
with so many variations,
Yeah.
where do we even begin?
Right.
What are some of the key themes or trends that you've observed in your research?
Well, one trend that's been particularly alarming
Okay.
is the rise of online neo-Nazi communities. The internet has become such a powerful tool
Yeah.
for these groups.
Uh-huh.
It allows them to spread propaganda, recruit new members,
Yeah.
connect with like-minded individuals across geographical boundaries.
That's scary.
It is.
It's like the internet has almost become this breeding ground for hate.
Yeah, I mean, it can be.
Right.
These online spaces often become echo chambers
Yeah.
where extremist ideas are just amplified and reinforced.
Yeah.
And, they provide a platform for individuals to become radicalized
Okay.
in ways that, might not have been possible before.
I imagine the rhetoric in these online forums is pretty intense.
It can be very disturbing.
Yeah.
You see a lot of hate speech,
Right.
conspiracy theories,
Yeah.
Holocaust denial.
Right.
Some of these groups also openly promote violence against minority groups.
Wow.
It's a toxic, toxic environment.
Yeah. This is heavy stuff.
It is.
But it's important to understand what we're dealing with here.
Absolutely.
Are there any efforts being made to counter the spread of this neo-Nazi ideology online?
Yes, thankfully.
Okay.
There are. There are organizations and individuals working hard to monitor these online spaces,
Okay.
report hate speech,
Uh-huh.
challenge the misinformation that's being spread.
Okay.
Social media platforms are also under increasing pressure
Yeah.
to take a more proactive role in moderating content
Okay.
and removing hateful material.
Sounds like a constant uphill battle, though.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
But it's a battle that has to be fought.
Yeah.
We can't let these hateful ideologies fester and grow unchecked online.
Yeah.
The stakes are too high.
So we've talked about this online dimension.
Right.
But what about real-world activity?
Right.
Are these neo-Nazi groups just keyboard warriors?
Right.
Or are they engaging in offline actions as well?
Unfortunately, it's not just online posturing.
Right.
Neo-Nazi groups have been linked to a whole range of real-world crimes,
Right.
from vandalism and harassment
Okay.
to assault and even terrorism.
I think that's what scares me the most, the potential for these ideologies
Right.
to spill over from the virtual world into actual violence.
Yeah, it's a legitimate concern. That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why it's so crucial to take these groups seriously.
Yeah.
We need to understand their motivations, their networks,
Yeah.
and their potential for violence.
You mentioned earlier that neo-Nazi groups often interpret National Socialism in vastly different ways.
They do, yeah.
Can you give us some examples of how that plays out in practice?
Sure. So some neo-Nazi groups might focus really heavily on racial purity, advocating for the creation of, like, a white ethno-state.
Right.
They might see themselves as defenders of the white race against what they perceive as a threat from non-white populations.
And that ties back into the idea we were discussing earlier about how Hitler defined the people in such a narrow and exclusionary way.
A very narrow way.
Yeah. It's like they're picking up where he left off.
Exactly. Other neo-Nazi groups might be more focused on, like, anti-government activism.
Okay.
They see themselves as revolutionaries fighting against a corrupt system that they believe is controlled by shadowy elites.
Right.
They often draw inspiration from the more militaristic and rebellious aspects of Nazi ideology.
Okay.
But their focus is more on overthrowing the existing power structure than on racial purity.
So it sounds like even within this fragmented landscape, there are still these recurring themes of power, control, this desire to dominate others.
Right. Yeah, there are.
It's pretty bleak.
It can be. And then you have groups that delve into the more esoteric or occult beliefs associated with Nazism.
Okay.
They might be fascinated by Nazi mysticism, drawing upon symbols, rituals, ideas that were popular in certain fringe elements of the original Nazi movement.
So they're not just reviving this, like, political ideology, but also tapping into this kind of, like, dark spirituality.
You could say that, these groups often believe they are privy to secret knowledge or hidden truths
Right.
that give them this sense of power and superiority.
Right.
And they often incorporate those beliefs into their overall ideology,
Yeah.
making them even more difficult to understand and counter.
So it's almost like you need a personalized deep dive for each group
Yeah.
to really grasp the specific worldview.
Their specific worldview, exactly.
That very complex and nuanced landscape.
Yeah, it is. And it highlights the challenge of trying to understand and address neo-Nazism.
Yeah.
It's not a static ideology.
Right.
It's constantly evolving, adapting, and fracturing.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of those nuances if we're going to effectively counter the threat it poses.
Okay, so we've talked about the fragmented nature of neo-Nazism.
Right.
The role of the internet in its spread.
Right.
And the fact that it's not just this online phenomenon.
Yeah.
But also manifests in real-world actions.
Real-world actions, yep.
That's a lot to process.
It is. Yeah.
What are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Yeah, good question.
What do you want them to understand about this complex and disturbing phenomenon?
I think the most important takeaway is that, we can't afford to be complacent about neo-Nazism.
Right.
It's a real threat.
Yeah.
And it's one that we need to take seriously.
Uh-huh.
We need to educate ourselves about its various forms, understand its motivations.
Yeah.
And be vigilant
in
challenging its hateful ideologies.
So it's about awareness.
It is.
Education.
Yep.
And a willingness to speak out.
That's right.
Against these harmful beliefs.
Exactly. Silence is complicity.
Yeah.
We all have a responsibility to push back against neo-Nazism.
Right.
And create a more just and equitable society.
Okay, that's a powerful message.
Yeah.
And on that note,
yeah,
I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Yeah, good idea.
But don't go anywhere just yet.
Don't go anywhere.
In the final part, we'll explore what the persistence of these ideologies tells us about the state of our world today.
Oh, that's a good one.
And what we can do to counter their spread.
Right.
Stay with us.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into National Socialism and its echoes in the modern world. We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have. From, the complexities of the original ideology to the disturbing realities of neo-Nazism in the digital age. It's heavy stuff. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but it leaves me with a lot of questions.
I understand. It is a lot to process.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to grapple with these difficult topics.
Yeah.
Even if they make us uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the big picture.
Right.
What does the persistence of these ideologies, both National Socialism and its neo-Nazi offshoots, what does it tell us about the state of our world today?
I think it points to a deeper sense of unease and anxiety that many people are feeling.
Right.
We live in a time of rapid change, globalization, technological advancements, economic shifts.
Yeah.
All these forces have created a sense of uncertainty and disruption for a lot of people.
So, in a way, these extremist ideologies offer a warped kind of solution to those anxieties.
Right.
It's like a simplistic narrative.
Right. A simple narrative.
That blames the other.
Yeah, blames the other.
And promises a return to some kind of mythical golden age.
Exactly. They exploit people's fears and frustrations, offering a scapegoat and a sense of belonging.
Right.
They create this false sense of order and purpose.
Yeah.
In a world that feels increasingly chaotic.
It's that classic strategy of
divide
and conquer.
Right.
Yeah, it is. Create an enemy, sow distrust, and then offer yourself up as the solution.
Right. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But it's a strategy that's still effective.
Yeah.
In the 21st century.
Yeah.
And the internet has amplified its reach and power in ways that we're only beginning to understand.
Okay. So we've diagnosed the problem, but what's the cure?
Right.
How do we counter these divisive ideologies and build a more inclusive and just world?
There's no simple answer, no magic bullet.
Yeah.
It requires a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
That addresses the root causes of these anxieties.
Okay.
We need to work towards greater economic justice.
Okay.
Ensuring that everyone benefits from the fruits of globalization and technological progress.
Yeah.
We need to invest in education, critical thinking skills,
Yeah.
and media literacy
Right.
to help people recognize and resist propaganda and misinformation.
So it's not just about tackling the symptoms, but also addressing the underlying conditions that make these ideologies so appealing in the first place.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And we also need to
Yeah.
foster this sense of empathy
Yeah.
and shared humanity.
Okay.
We need to remind ourselves that we have more in common than what divides us. It's about building bridges,
Yeah.
fostering understanding,
Right.
and celebrating diversity.
That sounds like a tall order.
Yeah,
Especially in a world that often feels so
it
polarized
does.
and
It
divided.
does.
But it's a goal worth striving for, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The stakes are too high to give in to despair
Yeah.
or cynicism. We have to believe that a better world is possible,
Right.
and we have to work toward that vision with courage and determination.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive.
I agree.
But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the dangers
Yeah.
of defining the people in these narrow and exclusionary ways.
Right.
But what does it mean
Right.
to define the people
Yeah.
inclusively?
Right.
What does society look like where everyone feels a sense of belonging, regardless of their race, religion, ethnicity, or any other
arbitrary characteristic.
That's the challenge I leave you with. Go out and help build that world.
That's a beautiful challenge.
Yeah.
And one that's worth dedicating our time and energy to.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.